Burning Issy, Melvin Burgess, Chapter 12. I was angry with her for telling me nothing. I was frightened at what she asked of me. I'd been taught all my life to fear fire. I was not sure I wanted to know about myself now, but I trusted her and loved her. Even when after peculiar things began to happen, I was not at first frightened by them. I began seeing things out the corner of my eye. I couldn't see them properly. They might have been animals or birds or strange little people, but they were never ordinary. I'd catch a glimpse of something, turn my head, and it would be gone. Once I saw a round green face while I was weeding the cabbages. When I looked again, it was nothing, just a fat cabbage plant sitting in the dark earth. A trick of the eyes, I thought, but it had been so clear. Another time I was sitting with my back against the wall of the house when I saw or felt that long green arm was leaning out above me. I looked up in alarm and there was just a runner from the briar rose growing out from the wall over my shoulder. It was clear to me that Ian saw these visions too. Once we were planting pea seeds in the garden, spilling them into a little trench we had dug close to the fence. On the other side, a big cushion of dark green nettles were pushing against the fence. I had a strange feeling about those nettles, and I kept my eye on them. Sure enough, the second Ian turned away to check on Mark, who was stacking cloth in a little shed behind us, I had a sense of a host of little dark green creatures pushing underneath the fence and groping through it. A sudden rush of them taking chance while Ian was looking the other way. When she turned back, she saw me staring. "Are they trying to get in again?" she growled. She began to poke about next to the fence and grubbed out a handful of roots that had grown from under the nettles on the other side. "I won't be here much longer. You can have it back then," she grumbled. The nettles shivered in the breeze. I couldn't help thinking how innocent they looked. "It's no use looking like that," snapped Diane. "I've got the evidence right here, haven't I?" And she flung the roots at them in temper. I often noticed her having words with the weeds that grew around the fence. I've never seen any garden that grew so few weeds as Diane's. In another part of the garden was a big elder bush which was just now coming into full flush of flower, weeks earlier than similar bushes outside. Once I walked past, I caught sight of a great golden girl smiling in the sunshine with such a head of pale blonde hair that I stopped in my tracks and stared. And it was nothing but the elder bush, so heavy with its flower like a great bright mound of blossom in the grass. A few days later, when Aya and I were picking flowers to make syrup, I distinctly heard someone snap angrily at us. I turned round. There was no one there, but as I looked back, I caught a glimpse of Ian plucking a flower from the hair of the golden girl who was making a face and slapping out at her. "It's all right, you've got plenty," said Ian. "Why this fuss every year? I never take it all, do I? And I always pay for them." The golden girl looked sulkily for a second, and then there was just the elder bush, and Ian plucking tresses of bright pale flowers. When she finished, true to her word, she put mulch of manure around the roots. I thought it marvellous that her garden should have a life of its own, and never thought for a second that these half-seen, half-imagined glimpses of another world might be dangerous. It's only later that I began thinking about the imps and the devils, and the thought of the hellfire made my scars itch. The first shadow fell one afternoon about a week after I had arrived. I was in among some bean poles pulling out the dandelions and had crept in, and some of them seemed to be trying to get away. I kept catching a glimpse, an idea, I don't know, of a little yellow face stealing about behind the beans, tiptoeing, if you can imagine it, and keeping out of sight. I searched and searched, but I couldn't find it, and yet I couldn't get rid of the feeling that it was there, somewhere. At last I got so exasperated I said out loud, "It's no use hiding, I know you're there." As soon as I said it, I realised I was not alone. I looked up. One of Iron's weavers standing behind me, and a little to one side was Tolly, who'd seen the whole thing. The weaver, who was staring at me in so much of alarm with his face, he crossed himself rapidly 4 or 5 times, muttered something under his breath and hurried off. I heard what he called me, and I felt my face turn white. Tolly came over. "You'd best be careful when there's folk about," he said. "They catch glimpses too, and it scares them." He bent down among the bean poles, rooted about, then grubbed up a fat dandelion plant that was hidden away. "There he is, see?" He chucked the plant to one side and winked easily at me, but I couldn't take it in like that. That man had called me witch. "The Bible makes no distinction," Pastor Holden had said. It didn't matter that Iron was what kind or good, or if her soul was not her own. I remembered Jeanette, who was such a dangerous friend to have. Poor Jeanette, who knew how love that could have been trusted. I'd believed witches to be creatures like Demdike for so long, it seemed impossible that Iron could be a witch as well. But the more I thought about it, the dangerous spirits in the garden seemed to be. The first time since I had so eagerly set out from the Pendle that morning, I remembered the things Nat had said about her. "God will forgive us for accepting our help," he'd said. I was beginning to wish I'd never left to come and live with someone familiar with so many things so unholy. And then the fire dream began again. Before I came to Irons, I had a nightmare only rarely, but once she'd awakened something, it was in me. I could avoid fire when I was awake, but in my sleep it came back to me. It happened the night after the weaver had called me a witch. It followed the same pattern as ever, the cosy warmth, the sudden snatch out into the blinding light, the heat of the blazing fire. But now I knew I was dreaming. My screams parted to let me through Iron's whispering voice. "Look, Issy, look. Where are you? What do you see? Help me!" I was desperate to find anything that might pull me out of the dream. "Shh! It's just a dream. Nothing's happening. Don't try to wake up. Look around you, Issy. What do you see? Where are you?" I can't, I moaned. At the same time, I felt a surge of rage and bitterness as I realised that far from waking me up, she was trying to keep me in the dream. I began to scream and screech and flinging myself violently from side to side, forcing my head to turn away from the awful unknown sight. I let a howl of anguish so great that I woke up. I sat up panting. There was Iron on my bed reaching out to me. "There's a girl. Well done, Issy," she was saying as she held me to her. I pushed her away. "Why didn't you wake me?" I demanded. She put her arms down and looked sadly at me. "I told you, you have to see through that fire if you want to know yourself." "I don't want to know." "I think you do," she said quietly. "Anyone can wake you up, but only you can find your way through that dream. It will always come back until you learn to see through it. It's a nightmare. You have to wake me up. Not a nightmare, a memory of when you were small. You know what happened. Why can't you just tell me? I begged. She shook her head firmly. If I tell you, you'll always be imprisoned by it. You have to do it yourself. I don't know. I don't want to know. I felt betrayed and unsafe with her. Leave me alone. I flung myself down on the bed. In a moment she began to move away, but I sat up and begged her to promise she would wake me up if it happened again. I can't promise that, she replied unhappily. I can't make any promise that will keep you from yourself. Then I'm going back. You can't keep me here, I threatened. There was a pause. I'll promise if you make me a promise, she said at last. Promise me that when you're feeling strong enough, you'll try and see through the fire. I promise, I said at once. I was certain I would never be so strong. Then I promise too, said Ihan. I told myself I should know better than to trust her promises. For the time being she kept her word, but it seemed that Ihan's house was a place for dreams. 3 or 4 times a week woke from the nightmare with her sitting on my bed shaking me. From time to time she reminded me of my promise, but I always said, not yet. In fact, I'd made up my mind to stay ignorant of the dream and of my past, if that was to be the cost. I asked her I had no more questions about myself or herself. I'd begun to distrust her. All my joy in her had gone. I was biding my time until I could go back to Pendle. That's the end of chapter 12.